Good morning, my friends. In their quest for language, an infant listens carefully to each brief sentence story provided by their caregivers. It's cold outside. You must be hungry. The kitty is soft. With time, values are also absorbed by the child as a parent speaks honestly or manipulates truth, expresses frustration, joy, guilt, love, and so on. As we grow, the stories of our lives bloom as we embrace the meanings of the stories imparted to us through language. Of course, each of us has an individual story, but there are societal stories that are embraced as part of our culture that can change from generation to generation. This was brought home to me by my youngest daughter, who told me that her generation has a different sense of humor than mine. And it's true, we do not always find the same things funny. The theory of social constructionism posits that people develop knowledge and understanding of the world in a social context, that much of what we perceive as reality depends upon our shared assumptions, and that many of the things we take for granted and believe are objective reality are actually socially constructed and thus can change as society changes. The history of a people can be selective. My daughter-in-law, who was raised in the South, learned of the War of Northern Aggression, while I learned of the Civil War. Personally, I only learned of the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre in recent years. And after hearing the stories of some of the survivors of that tragedy, their grief and trauma were cemented in my mind. As humans, we sometimes either glorify or deny our collective history. Holocaust deniers, pandemic deniers, and climate change deniers have in common their fear of facing something truly awful with their eyes wide open. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, "We all make mistakes," and surely we've all taken actions with unintended consequences. Have you ever cringed when asked to reveal your most embarrassing moment? It's hard to make yourself so vulnerable, but our mistakes help us to learn and grow, and more importantly, to empathize with others. It can take a lot of internal work to process what we see as our mistakes, along with the accompanying frustration, embarrassment, and anger with ourselves. But this processing allows us to more readily recognize the struggles that other people face. We can help others to learn and grow as we share our stories. This might require courage, because we open ourselves to critical judgment. But if we're careful to share our stories with compassion in ways that promote healing and aren't just tales of one-upmanship, then they can help others. We must also remember to be respectful of the stories of others if we retell them, so their stories don't become malicious gossip. So, in a society, generally, the purposes of storytelling are to promulgate cultural traditions through entertaining, educating, transmitting morals and values, and revealing a historical record. And the ways that we express stories can vary widely. We're very creative. There's, of course, the oral tradition of storytelling. There are writing stories and books. There's dance. For example, the Polynesians were very creative with this. They developed hula as a dance style to dramatize the words of chants called oli, or songs called mele, in a visual way. There are songs that reveal our history, such as the Rebel Soldier song, which I'll play now. There are puppet shows that reveal history as well as cultural norms and traditions, and I'll play an Indonesian puppet video for you now. People have written epic poems, created drama, created visual arts, delved into journalism, and more recently social media to express all of our varied stories. I'd like to talk for a minute about the Overton window. If you don't know what it is, it's a model for understanding how ideas in society change over time. Politicians generally will only pursue policies that are widely accepted throughout society as legitimate, and those ideas are within the Overton window. Sometimes the window shifts. Politicians risk losing popular support if they champion ideas outside the Overton window, but when the Overton window shifts, they might be able to embrace those ideas. Think about how difficult it must be for a government leader who is ethical and realizes that they've made a mistake that had unintended negative consequences. How do they save face without risking their integrity? How do they admit mistakes without losing public support? How do they live with themselves when the world has condemned them? We can change the way history lessons are presented. In this media-driven age, we can seek to support journalists who provide a balanced perspective and offer a nuanced view of the complexities of being human, and whose quest to understand is greater than their quest to sensationalize. Politicians, after all, are human, and situations are often very complicated, and so can be their response. The UN Refugee Agency conducted a project about storytelling. They looked at the kinds of stories that were told in an interpersonal setting, so at the water cooler or in the hallway at work. And they found that intentionality is critical to that interpersonal form of storytelling to build a culture that you want to build. Culture isn't really built from the top, but from informal conversations. And they found that it's both important to push back on harmful narratives and also to try to get people to focus on finding ways to retell stories in a constructive way. We can demand accountability and honesty from government officials and educators and challenge narratives that are inconsistent with the culture we're trying to build. We can do this partly by being intentional in the stories we create and tell. So I'd like to offer you a little meditation. Just close your eyes, relax, take a deep breath, and consider your cultural core. There are things that you have strong opinions about values like honesty, loyalty, courage. You might have strong opinions about politics, about your work or your area of expertise, about family. Ask yourself where these attitudes came from. From the stories you heard from your caregivers or your teachers, from your siblings. Were there books or movies that had a strong impact on you as a child? I'd like to end with another story. And you may have already seen this, but I find it very inspiring. So thank you for listening.